Welcome back. Okay. Um, so that's for the API. Okay. Let's talk about the front end web application. I'm going to start with something really simple. It's not going to be terribly secure, but we're just getting started on authentication and authorization and things. So this is not really ready for prime time use. Okay. So for today, I'm just going to have a really simple. Where is it? Um, where are you? Oh, here it is. I'm just gonna have a very let me quickly go and launch my API. Rake dev rake run dev and here rake run dev. Okay, so I'm going to launch my API in one terminal, and I'm going to launch my web application in the other terminal. So it's going to be two separate applications now, two different Roto applications, one for my API, one for my web application. Okay, eventually they will run on separate machines, even when we deploy it onto the cloud as well. They'll be two completely separate applications. All right. Um, so my user-facing web application, I've just made a very simple one. I'm not very good at front end, so I'm gonna just show you the most basic way to make a front end application. You're welcome to add more JavaScript and make it as fancy as you want. So this is what my front end application looks like today. You can log in, and that's about all you can do. There's no register button yet. We'll talk about registration maybe next week. All right. So assuming that there's already entries in my database, I can log in using this, and you'll notice a few things about this site. First of all, there's two parts to it. There's obviously a navigation bar on top, and there is my homepage is this stuff below it. Welcome to Credence. Okay. You'll also notice my homepage is smart enough to know I've not logged in yet, so it encourages me to log in right here. But I can use either one of these login buttons. Okay. Um, What else have I done? I'm using a Bootstrap framework, so it's just a front-end framework that makes my web application a little bit nicer than I would have made it by myself. Okay, so it comes with some nice features like as I resize my window, it kind of responsively changes the layout accordingly. Okay, and in fact, if I make it too narrow, like if I'm looking at this from a mobile device and I make this too narrow, you'll notice my navigation bar disappears and it becomes a nice little it becomes a little drop down right here. Okay, I didn't do any code to make this happen. This is just Bootstrap that's doing this for me. So I'll tell you a little bit about how it works. But I'm assuming most of you are probably more savvy with front end development than I am. Okay, so let's just try to log in. So my only feature today is log in. So I'm going to log in. Oh, look, I've logged in before. Samia Ray, my very secret word. Remind me to change my password, okay? Okay, so let me log in and ta-da, I'm in. And only things I want you to note here is I'm obviously logged in now, so it no longer says login. I should be able to see my projects, but I haven't coded that yet. I'll do that some other week, okay? I've got a little drop down here so that I can check my account and I can log out. Before I go there, notice I'm back on the home page, same stuff as before. It no longer asks me, please log in, because it knows that I'm logged in right now. So my homepage has changed a little bit. So there's something dynamic going on in my homepage. My homepage knows whether I'm logged in or not. And when I log in, you notice this little message. We call this a flash message. Flash, not because of Adobe Flash, not that Flash. It's just a flash message just means a message that you just show one time. So it's a one-time message, a flash message saying, welcome back, Somia. All right, fantastic. Um, what else do I want to show you? Somia.ray. So here I can do two things. I can look at my account information. I'm only going to show my username and email address, okay? But in future, I might show other things. I will show other things. The other thing I could do is I can log out. If I log out, I'm sent back to the login page. If I go back to the home page, I'm clearly logged out. All right. So let me just talk a little bit about what's going on here and how this is working. I'm going to kind of go through it a little bit fast, but bear with me. All right. Okay. Um, yes. Okay. All right. So we're going to make a web application this week, and the web application is a whole new application. So you will make a whole new repo under your GitHub organization for your application. All right, and it's going to have a whole new. You're going to have to recreate the whole Rhoda application from scratch once again. All right, so you're going to have controllers. You're going to have some config files, etc., etc. A lot of stuff that you had before. The main difference is going to be this time we're going to have a presentation folder with all our, whatever you have, CSS or JavaScript or HTML, all that stuff will go in a presentation folder, okay? And let me kind of discuss some of those things. So a few things I want to show on this slide is you may have some style.cs, you may have some like cascading style sheets that you can define by yourself. You may have some public files, which are not HTML files, but any other files that you can deliver, like for example, some images and things like that will be typically in a public folder. They will be not kept with your HTML files, okay? Your HTML files and stuff will go in this views directory. To make my life easier, I don't really like writing HTML, so I'm writing an alternative to HTML called Slim, not to be confused with the PHP framework, also called Slim. This is something different. It's just a Ruby framework that allows me to write a simplified version of HTML, and that gets converted into HTML when the page gets delivered to the browser. Okay. So the only special gem so far is Slim, so that I can write my HTML in a simpler syntax. You don't have to use Slim. There's another format that's very popular called ERB, which is basically just HTML with Ruby embedded directly into it. Okay. Slim also allows me to create HTML code with Ruby embedded into it, but it simplifies the HTML for me, and I'll show you in a moment what I mean. All right. In my controller, I'm gonna have a few routes that a few plugins you're not familiar with yet, potentially. One is I'm telling it that all my views, all my like final HTML files are in app/presentation/views, and please render them using the Slim engine. So it's saying you'll find some files called Slim files in here. It's basically HTML. Please compile them into HTML for me. All right. If you want to write HTML, then the engine will be called ERB. I think it stands for Embedded Ruby. So you can write regular HTML files with the extension .erb, and within them you can have Ruby code to do some dynamic processing. All right. I have a plugin called Assets, and you use this plugin to tell it where your CSS and JavaScript files are. All right. So I'm telling it my CSS file is called style.css. All my assets are under app presentation assets. All right. Finally, I'm telling it I've got a bunch of public files, which are not HTML files. These are other files that need to be loaded, and these are not assets. These are not JavaScript CSS assets. In my case, the only files that I have are like images, and I'm going to put them in this public folder, and you're going to tell it where your public folder is. All right. I'll get to the other plugins later, but these are the main plugins. A couple more things you've got to do. In the beginning of your routing, before you start routing, like before you actually get to your actual routes, you got to write routing.public and routing.assets. This basically tells Rhoda that if somebody's looking for public files, you're not going to find it in my routes. You're going to find them here. If somebody's looking for CSS or JavaScript, you're not going to find it in my routes. Please find it here. Okay? It just tells it be aware of. So essentially, what routing.public and routing.assets is doing is it's setting up routes for you automatically using the information you provided up here. Okay? And after that, you can start defining your own custom routes down here. Are you okay with this? Okay? Not too difficult, I hope, if you've done any web development before. All right. That is the question. It's a prereq for this class. Come on. I'll cover my back. Okay. If it is new to you, then feel free to come talk to me or ask us on Slack. We'd be happy to help you if you're not familiar with some of these words or terminology. Okay. Yes, wait. I'm sorry, for assets you said? No, the assets are your CSS and yes. For public, yes. If you just do if you just if you just do the URL like, your name of your domain slash name of the file, it will go directly and find it in public. Yeah, this line right here, routing.public, creates that route for you automatically. Yes. Glad you're impressed. We aim to impress. Okay. All right, cool. Um, all right, moving on. So I mentioned that I'm too lazy to write HTML, and I hate writing HTML because yeah. Question before I move on. Yeah, I'm not sure myself. I don't know. And I don't know, and I can't look at my code and tell you the answer because in my code this week, I don't have more than, oh, oops, this is the app. How am I doing it? Root. Yeah, it seems to work. It seems to work. It seems to work right here is fine. I'm just as surprised as you are. All right. As you can see, when I'm doing a web application versus a web API, I'm two different developers. I'm like, I don't know what that guy's doing. It's crazy. Okay. So I mentioned that I'm too lazy to write HTML, and that's my own deficiency. But let me just introduce you to the template I'm using. I really like it. I like it more than HTML, but it looks almost identical to HTML. I'm using a template called Slim, which allows me to create a quick and dirty version of HTML. Actually, the way I describe it is, this is what HTML would look like if Python programmers developed it. Okay. It looks beautiful. You like it? Yay! We have a customer. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of them. Pug, Hamel, Slim, tons and tons of them. There's probably better ones than this out by now, but like in the past few years, I've been moving over different ones over like my teaching career, and I've settled on this for now. So please don't introduce me to another one because then I have to change everything. So basically, this is like HTML that looks like Python. Okay, so if you like Python code, you'll love this. Why does it look like Python? Because in regular HTML, you have to make an HTML tag, and then you have to make a slash end tag. No end tags. All you got to do is indent your code, and it'll do the intelligent end tag for you automatically. All right. So, for example, here I start the head tag here, but you notice there's no end to the head tag. It's just everything indented under head will come within head and slash head. All right. So it's just done for you automatically. You don't need quotation. You don't need a lot of stuff. It looks really elegant to me. If this was HTML, I'd be like scrolling for like 2 days to find stuff. But this is like all really quickly and in a very concise way. All right. You just say title and you just give the title right away. All right. Um, and then all right. And some tags like JavaScript tags. It's like really you just write Java. If you want to put in JavaScript, you just write JavaScript colon, and then you just write your JavaScript right in there. It's no problem. All right, you don't gotta make a song and dance about writing JavaScript. Okay. Body H1. There's this special notation here where if you just write this pound and then a word, that means that this is a no. I think this is a class. This is a class. Um, this is a span class. I think this is a span. I can't remember. I have to go look at the documentation. We'll look at the documentation in a second. Okay. Some other special things in here. I'll skip yield for a moment. You can write Ruby code directly into this and mix it up with the Slim code. Just, I love the enthusiasm of this. Yeah. If you want to write Ruby code, just put a dash and just start writing a Ruby code. And then, like, if items.any is my Ruby code, okay? And under that, this is Slim again. I'm just telling it start a table. And then within the table, I write a Ruby code with a for loop, and I'm just saying make these rows of the table. If you know HTML, and I hope you know HTML to get into this class, these are the rows of the table. Within each row, this is the columns for that row. So it turns out it is very nice. And again, the dash and the equal sign are both telling Slim, I want to put some Ruby in here. The difference is that equal sign means run this Ruby and return the result in its place. The dash means I want you to just run Ruby, but I'm not interested in the output of it. Okay? So you'll figure it out as you kind of go along with this. Okay. I will. Okay. One thing I want to mention, and I don't have a good example of it here, but maybe I have an example of it in my actual code. Let's move on. Okay. So for example, here is my homepage. It just looks like this. H1 header. Welcome to Credence. All right. P is for a paragraph. Da 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 da. P for a paragraph. I for italics. So on and so forth. Okay. This dash says this is Ruby code unless this object is defined. Do this, which means current account, I'll explain in a moment, is an object where I'm holding the current user's account information. If they haven't logged in, I don't have that object. So if that object does not exist, then show them this paragraph with this link saying log in to start with this link right here. All right. Now, if you take a look at my, ooh, did I close it? Did I close it? Did I close it? Did I close it? No, why did I close it? Fool. Okay, let me come here, open up, launch Firefox, localhost 9292. Okay, so if you look here, this is all the code I just showed you for the home page. But where's the navigation bar? Well, the navigation bar doesn't belong to the home page. It belongs to every single page of my website. So what I can do is in my views file, all my pages are here. I've got a home file, I've got a home page, I've got a login page, etc., etc. I've got an accounts page. I've got a special file called layout.slim, and this is a special file. In the layout.slim file, you can define what is the general layout of all my pages. All right? So let's take a look at it. Here's the layout of all my pages. So here's the layout.slim. And this actually contains the full HTML file representation. For example, you notice my homepage, it didn't even start with an HTML tag. You know that all HTML should begin with an HTML tag. Well, it doesn't need it because it's embedded within the full layout page. And the full layout page has the full, like the HTML, the headers, and all that stuff is in here. Okay. I'm also loading my style sheets for my page. Of course, I'm too lazy to write CSS because I'm not a front-end guy. So I'm just using Bootstrap's CSS. Bootstrap is a framework that basically gives you CSS and JavaScript already that you can use just out of the box. Okay. Here's the actual CSS. Here's the JavaScript for Bootstrap. It requires two things. Well, it requires this second one. This is actually the Bootstrap JavaScript. This is the Bootstrap framework. It gives you JavaScript that you need. You don't need to use it yourself. It uses it for you intelligently. All right. Bootstrap also uses a library called Popper for like modal windows and things like that, I think. And you've got to load that before you load the JavaScript for Bootstrap. Here is the yes question. Is there a gem for Bootstrap? There. Oh, I never thought about that. There's probably a gem for Bootstrap. Is there? We have computers. I don't ban the use of computers. Bootstrap Ruby gem. Bootstrap Ruby gem. There appears to be. Bootstrap. This is for Bootstrap 4 still. There probably is a gem, but I don't see why you need to use a gem because all you gotta do is just load the CSS and JavaScript. That's all you gotta do. So you can just write it by yourself. It's just like 3 lines of code. So I would not use a gem for that. And also for other reasons. If you install a gem, then the CSS and JavaScript for Bootstrap is probably put into your own local server. But I don't want my web application to be delivering JavaScript and CSS. It's not part of my responsibility. All right. Also, it slows down my website because I got to give it my HTML, I got to give it my CSS, I got to give it my JavaScript. You notice here, I'm telling it to load this JavaScript from a completely different website, from JS Deliver. JS Deliver is a CDN. It's a content distribution network, basically meaning that they have machines all around the world. When a browser asks them, hey, I need this JavaScript, it doesn't go to like a central server somewhere. It goes to the nearest server for JS Deliver. It could be it could be like in their local country or in their, I don't know how close it could be. All right, so it comes out much faster than accessing your server. Okay. The other nice thing is a lot of people use this CDN, so a lot of browsers have already cached this JavaScript. They're not loading it for the first time when they come to your website. It's probably already cached in their browser because it's a common site. Yes, yes, it's a yeah, network effect indeed. Indeed. All right. You'll notice one more thing. The CSS, I'm loading it from a different website than the JavaScript. And the reason is I am not loading the actual Bootstrap CSS. I'm loading a modified Bootstrap CSS. It's been modified to change the style and the colors a little bit. Okay. If you go to this website, bootswatch.com, you'll find a whole bunch of like Bootstrap CSS for different themes. So I'm loading a particular theme called Cerulean, which gives my web page this blue color. But if you go to Bootswatch free is the keyword. You'll find all these different like themes with different colors and things. So you just pick the one that you like. Okay. And instead of the regular JavaScript CSS, all of these have just modified the JavaScript CSS to change the colors and layout a little bit. Okay, so you'll find some really nice ones. Okay, if you're a company and you want a much more fancy one, then you will just go to the actual Bootstrap page, Bootstrap, um, and I think you will find here somewhere some official themes. These are typically not free. These are gorgeous, but you have to pay for them. All right, but they look really nice. Like these are all just kind of like made for you out like your website will look exactly like one of these just coming right out of the box. People will be like, man, you spent a lot of money on this. Well, no, I spent 49 US dollars to get one of these layouts. Okay. It's not that expensive, right? Like it's one time. It's higher than hiring somebody who actually knows how to write CSS and HTML very well. You can find what free? Oh, tell us later where you can find those ones free. All right. I didn't hear that. Gonna scrub the video. Be like, all right. So if you load this JavaScript and CSS, you automatically get this beautiful colors and layout and everything. And that whole responsive thing that you saw, like when I mentioned to you that it's responsive, like when I readjust this, the navigation bar disappears, it becomes a drop down. I didn't code this. Bootstrap just does it for you automatically. The CS and JavaScript just interact and they do that for you. They monitor and manage how the website is being, what kind of device it's on, what kind of size it is. So in this mode, it assumes it's on a mobile device. At this length, it assumes it's on a tablet, and if you make it bigger, here it assumes you're on a desktop. So it intelligently resizes and changes the layout for you. You got to write no code. Okay, that's a good deal for me. No code is the best code. All right. So this is Bootstrap. If you've never used Bootstrap, the basic idea of Bootstrap, I'll tell it to you in 10 seconds. Okay, don't time me. Maybe take 20 seconds. The basic idea is your website is organized as a grid, which is 12 columns wide. and you just tell it every single element how many columns to use. Okay. So, and the layout will look something like this. For every, so you break down your website into divs, and for each div, you can tell it like, this is going to be a row of objects, and then another div here saying this is going to be one column, and you tell it how wide and which kind of device it's for. You'll see some examples in my code in a moment, okay? If you're not familiar with how many of you know how to use Bootstrap or a similar framework? What the hell am I teaching this for? Okay, what framework do you know that other than Bootstrap? Because Bootstrap is an old school framework. What other frameworks do you know? You're old school. Any other more better or newer frameworks? There's a bunch of them now. No, no, no. Sass is a language for the template. Bootstrap is written in Sass. Ah, screw it. You all know Bootstrap. So if you don't know how to use Bootstrap, this website is a tutorial. Like I was like really, I don't know anything about front end. I can't make any HTML. I'm the worst in the world at it, and I was like really intimidated. And I went to this website. Okay, just send us a link on Slack later. Okay, wait for me to make the channel first. Okay, this is websites from W3 schools. I sat down. I'm like, okay, I'll try to learn it, and it was like, I learned it in one afternoon. I was like, what? That was amazingly easy. The only problem is this is the best tutorial I found for it, but it's using Bootstrap version 4. The newest version of Bootstrap is version 5. I really recommend you use it. It's much more lightweight. It doesn't use it doesn't use like jQuery and some other heavy JavaScript libraries anymore, so it's very lightweight and loads very quickly. Looks really nice. But my suggestion is if you don't know how to use Bootstrap, learn Bootstrap 4 from this website. You may have to modify a few things to get it to work in Bootstrap 5, but very small modifications, not big, okay? Almost none. So to learn it, learn Bootstrap 4. When you're actually coding it, load Bootstrap 5 and just check the documentation to make sure it's still the same. 90%, 95% will be exactly the same, okay? But this tutorial is amazing. And W3 Schools is awesome. Like you can learn all kinds of cool stuff and it's so easy, it's so nice. Like I kind of lost a lot of my fear of front end after I learned this, okay? I was like, oh, okay. I'm not, I realized I'm not an idiot, I'm just lazy. That's why I hadn't learned it the whole time. All right. Okay, moving on. I've got about 45 minutes left. I want to spend the rest of it talking about state persistence, okay? So we're now kind of entering this phase where we got to talk about, well, how is this thing working? How am I able to log in? Oh God, my password again. I should make it something simpler. Okay. So how am I logging? How does the browser know who I am when I go from one page to another? Like, how does it remember who I am? Because remember, HTTP doesn't remember anything. It's a stateless protocol. It has no memory of who you were like 5 seconds ago. When you click a link, you're a brand new person to it. So somehow I've got to keep transferring this information from one page to the next of who I am, who you are, and what are you looking at and what you've done so far. Maybe it's an e-commerce page and I got to keep track of, oh, you added some stuff to your shopping cart. You've got to keep track of this information yourself and you've got to fool the browser into like kind of remembering this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. Again, I think for many of you, this is really old information, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page in case someone hasn't done web development in a long time, okay? So there's several ways for a web application. So forget the API for a moment. It has no state, more or less. Let's talk about the web application for a moment. Every time you make a request to the web application, you're somebody completely brand new. There's got to be some way to let the browser know what happened before and to remind the web application who you are. Like, are you logged in? Have you not logged in? Did you buy some things? Do you have a shopping cart ready? Like, etc. Okay. This means we've got to transfer states. And the word state just means what is the current situation of your application? Are you logged in? Are you logged out? Did you buy something? Did you not buy something? Like, what's your name? All this stuff, this knowledge about the user, what they're currently doing, this is called state. We've got to record the state somewhere of where this interaction, where this user experience is right now. okay, and what has happened before, if it's importance. And somehow, every time the browser comes to us, it has to remind us what state it's in. There's several ways of doing this. One is just by using get parameters. Like every time you come to a web page, the website can modify the URL to add some information in there so that so that when the browser returns, it returns with a particular URL that informs the server that who am I, I'm logged in, etc. You could do that's one way to do it. Okay, you can use the URLs in your to inform the server what's going on. You'll notice a lot of websites do this. If I go to Amazon, all right, I'm not logged in clearly, but free shipping to Taiwan, I always click that whenever I see it, okay? But you'll notice this Amazon link is freaking noisy. It's clearly not only just telling me what page I want to load, it's got a whole bunch of other information in here, which seems to be not for me to read. This looks like a UUID of some kind. But you see all this information up here? It's transferring information about what it knows about me into the URL. Now, when I click on another link, right? When I click on another link, it will have some of that. There's no other links on this page. Today's deals. Let me look at the URL for this. Let me just copy the link. And let me just paste it up here so we just see it. You'll notice again here is not only the link to the page, that ends over here. That ends here, right? But after it, keeps on having more and more information in here. Amazon is basically modifying all the links. Like every time I visit a page, it modifies all the links so that it encodes information about my visit into the URL itself. Okay. And one of the reasons it's doing that is because I haven't logged in yet, even. So it's just using the URL to encode more information into it. So it's dynamically changing the links that I'm clicking on to have information about who I am. Okay. That's one way to do it. And it's great. It's good for many reasons. One of which is that link never expires. If I close my browser down and come back to that same link, it's going to send that information right back to Amazon, and it'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're that anonymous person who was looking at shipping deals to Taiwan a few minutes ago. It's in that link somewhere." All right. Of course, there's problems with this. The link cannot be like super infinitely big. All right. There's a limit to how big a link can be. Does anybody know the limit to how big a URL can be? Anybody? Anybody want to take a guess? Don't Google it. Anybody want to take a guess? Come on, take a guess. We'll hold an auction. 64 what? Bytes? 64 characters? That's shorter than the length of my URL bar here. You know what? I'm just going to Google it. You guys don't want to play with me. Length of a URL. Oh, wow. So Microsoft Internet Explorer, what the hell is that? Has a URL length of 2 kilobytes roughly. Okay, never heard of it. Somewhere in my memory, but my therapist got rid of it, so I don't have to remember what it is. What about other browsers? So that's one problem. Different browsers accept different length. Let's say Firefox. Be more generous. 32 kilobytes. Holy crap! I can have a 32 kilobyte link. It's like a Word document. Chrome. 2 megabytes. Chrome limits is not the right word here. Of 2 megabytes for practical reasons. But bro, what are you talking about? That's not a limit. You don't need to cache anything. You can just put everything into the URL. But what's the obvious security problem here? Well, it's all in the URL. It's clearly visible for anyone to see, and it's modifiable by the user. Okay. Now, I'll bet you a lot of these like 2 megabyte links, URLs, probably have a hash in them to like to provide data integrity to prevent you from modifying it. Okay, but But the other downside is, of course, remember, URLs are part of the GET request header. They get logged. They get put into logs. So uh, anything sensitive up there is going to be in the log files of the server, which is a problem. You can't really put anything too sensitive in there. Okay. So that's obviously a clear problem with just using URLs. Also, coding it is a real pain in the ass because every single link on every single page has to be modified every single time to maintain all the information that was in the URL. That's a lot of work. So that may not be something you want to engage in. Okay. Um, there's several alternatives, one of which is not even on the slide. The most popular alternative is called cookies. And every time I say that word, I'm like, oh, I'm hungry. Okay, cookies. So what are cookies? Well, the cookies are simply information that instead of putting in the URL, you send it along with your HTTP response, and you just ask the browser, can you store this information in the browser? Like store it in your own database. And the next time you come back to my website, just return it, you know, return this cookie back to me with every single visit. So every time the user clicks and accesses your server, the cookie is sent back. And the cookie can be updated by the server at all times. Okay? So essentially, the website accesses your web application sends back some information. We call it a cookie. It's just like a string, it can be JSON or whatever you want. And the browser holds on to that cookie. Okay? And every time the browser returns your web application, it will return the cookie to you. Right? And the and so now with every single transaction, the web browser, the web application will transfer cookies. With every request, the cookie will be returned. With every HTTP response from the server, an updated cookie will be sent. And that's the idea of cookies. All right. It's very similar to putting it in the URL. The difference is it's not in the HTTP header, so it doesn't get logged and transferred all over the web. Okay. Other nice things about cookies is that it has a lot of built-in mechanisms that you could also implement in URLs with a lot of effort by yourself, but there's a lot of automatic mechanisms built into it. For example, when you send a cookie to a browser, you can just tell the browser, this cookie is only valid for a certain period of time. And after that period of time, the browser should delete the cookie. So you can have an expiration date on the cookie. All right? Etc. So one really nice thing about both URL, get URLs, get parameters, and cookies is that if your application crashes for any reason, boom, this crashes, no problem. All the information you need to handle the next request was on the browser. All right, as long as the browser doesn't totally get wiped off the machine. All right, so every time we just depend on the browser to return this information. And that also has another second really nice side effect. I don't have to store anything on my server about every single visit and every single interaction with users. That takes up a lot of space on my side. Instead, I just store it all on people's browser, on the browser side. All right. So my server doesn't have to store anything. Everything is stored on the browser. When the browser comes back to me and says, "Hey, I want to make a request," it has to tell me through the cookie. The information in the cookie will tell me: is the user logged in? Who are they? Do they want? Do they have a shopping cart? Etc. Etc. You can store all of that in the cookie. Right. How big can a cookie be? Cookie size limit. I'm gonna get really funny results now. It's be like it can be about yay big. I don't know. All right, not terribly big. A URL can actually be bigger than the cookie. Bizarre, huh? Only about what is that? 4 kilobytes. Um, and a single web page can only have several hundred cookies to one browser, which is fine. You typically don't need more than that. Okay. But you cannot really store a whole lot on the browser side. The browser does not want to become your database for you. Okay, it's not. They're not happy to do that. So well, that's a bit of a downer. Oh, geez, what's going on? Oh, I know what happened. Okay. So that's a bit of a downer. There's a limit to the size that cookies can be, but they're so nice because they have this expiration and other facilities with them. Well, what do you do if you need to have more information about them? If you need to have more information about them, then you need to start storing it on the server side. Okay, you need to store it on the server side. And one example of server side is called session variables. Session variables are simply variables that are objects that are stored on your web server in memory, possibly, and you just store whatever the user was doing, who they are, whether they're logged. You can store all this information in a local variable on your server. Okay, but then every time a user comes, how do you know which session variable belongs to them? Like if Tara visits, Tara. If Tara visits and then Steven visits, how do I know which user is which? Like, how do I mean, I have these session variables of Tara's visit. I have a session variable of Steven's visit. Now a browser comes to me and I say, who are you? Like, how do I know who they are? What's that? Any guess? You don't know who they are. They've got to tell you who they are. Cookies. So typically we use cookies and session variables together. The cookie just has a little ID number in there telling us who you are and any other information, like are you logged in, or some minimal information. If you want to store more information, then you look up the cookie's ID number and you look up which session variable belongs to that cookie. Okay, so your session variables can have some kind of information in them that links them to the cookie, so you know which session variable belongs to which person. All right. Lucky for you, this is such a well practiced thing that you don't have to write the code to manage cookies and sessions yourself. Modern web frameworks like Rails or Rhoda will just do all the work for you. You can access them. You don't have to make these linkages. You don't have to look at the cookie and say, what is the ID? Oh, which session variable was it? Rhoda will take care of all of that for you. And it will create the cookies you need automatically. You don't have to ask it to do that. Well, you have to ask it, but you don't have to tell it how to do that. Okay. Of course, you could go more crazy and rather the only problem with session variables is they're often in memory. So if your server totally crashes for some reason, you lose all the session information. So oftentimes we store the session information in a more secure place than the server. One option could be the database. You could just store your session information in the database as well. But we'll look at some other options later. Am I missing any other place to store state? JavaScript developers, am I missing any other place to store state? There is one more place to store state on the browser. No, not the fact. You could. You could be very clever about that. I said, is there another place to store state information? Web storage, right. So web store or web storage is a mechanism that modern browsers have, which is, it's kind of like a local browser side database that JavaScript can access. Okay. So modern browsers have this feature so that if you're running JavaScript on the browser, the JavaScript can have its own local database. However, I don't use web storage, and I would encourage you to use it very sparingly because there's a lot of security problems with web storage, meaning any JavaScript can read into your web storage. The web storage is going to be like for each website that you visit, but there's a lot of attacks out there where basically people figure out how to get illegal JavaScript to run on the browser, and that will be able to access the web storage of that website. Okay, so these are a class of cross-site scripting attacks or XSS attacks, where you go to a website and a hacker will inject JavaScript into it in such a way that it can access things that it should not be able to access. Okay, it's true for a lot of things, but it's not true for cookies. JavaScript cannot read your cookies. So cookies are actually a little bit safer than web storage for this reason, okay? You can use web storage. I'm not saying you can't use it, but in this class, I won't be using it for sensitive information because there's a whole class of attacks out there just designed to run JavaScript illegally on websites and access that web storage, all right? So if you are going to use it, don't put anything sensitive on it. But I'm not going to talk about web storage in this class because I'm not using JavaScript directly myself, okay? So just be careful about using web storage. There's a lot of security articles about there saying, please, everyone, go back to using cookies. It's just a whole hell of a lot safer, okay? And I'll talk about cross-site scripting attacks Like you may be wondering, how the hell do you run illegal JavaScript? What is that anyway? I'll show you some examples of that in following weeks. I'm going to try to hack into my own application and get it to run JavaScript it was not expecting to run, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay. Don't go out and doing that everywhere. Okay, please. So this is the operations we're going to run, and this is kind of the what do you call this diagram? Activity diagram, flow diagram. What's the name for this kind of diagram? No, it's not entity relationship. I think it's an activity diagram. I learned UML like decades ago. Activity diagram UML. No, it doesn't quite look like it. Interaction diagram, is that what it's called? You don't know. Interaction diagram. Yeah, it looks like an interaction diagram. Oh, good enough guess. It's called a sequence diagram. But somehow your keywords were great because it pointed me to the right Wikipedia page. It's called a sequence diagram. So this is a sequence diagram of like how we're going to do what we're going to do in this class. So the way it works is this. Alice, hopefully Alice, not Eve, will come in and she will log into the website. The browser will post the credentials as a web form to the web application. The web application will repost the credentials as a JSON object to my web API. Remember at the beginning of this class, I showed you the route in the web API to handle the post request for authentication. All right? The website will find the account, verify the account, etc., and will return the account information to the web application. The web application will create a cookie with a session ID in there. So it'll store the variables locally as a session for now. And it'll store the ID of the session in the cookie with some basic account information. This cookie will get, oh, look, a cookie. It will get returned to the browser. Okay? And the browser will say, welcome. Then the user will click on another page. The browser will send the cookie back to me. And from the cookie, the session ID in the cookie, the web application will retrieve the right session information. Okay? And so on and so forth. All these interactions now will involve sending a cookie back, a cookie being sent to me, send a cookie back, send a cookie to me. When the cookie, every time the cookie comes back to me, I find the right session variable, the session data for this user. Okay? All right. Now, in a lot of modern frameworks, they kind of blur the line between cookie and session. So you can either store your state information in the cookie, which is only 4 kilobytes, or you can store it on the server. And I'll talk about how to code the difference. All right? Let's take a look. Okay. So authentication and using sessions. All right? So this is now my web application, not the API. This is the application we're writing this week. Okay, this is a web application. It talks to the browser. Somewhere at the top of my Rhoda file, my main controller, app.rb, I'm going to tell Rhoda. Actually, I'm not telling Rhoda. I'm telling this to Rack. If you remember, Rhoda is a web framework that sits on top of a common web framework that is common to all the Ruby web frameworks like Rails, Sinatra, Rhoda, everybody, called Rack. And I'm going to tell Rack, I want to set up session variables, but don't store them on my server. Store all the session information in the cookie from now. Okay? So actually, I'm not going to store any information on the server side for now. Within 4 kilobyte limit, I'm going to use that 4 kilobyte limit and store all my session information in the cookie. The word session is kind of a unit describing a user experience. Session meaning this current visit and what we're doing right now. Okay? So store all the information that I want to store about this current visit in the cookie. Expire the cookie in 1 month. What the hell is 1 month? 1 month is a constant I created, and I think you'll find it somewhere in my code. 1 month. You've got to tell it in seconds. So it's 60 seconds a minute, 60 minutes, in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 30 days in a month, 1 month. All right. So expire this after 1 month. I've got one more thing in here. It's called a session secret, and I'll show you later what it does and what it's all about. Okay. Cool. All right. Okay. Um, moving on. So this is my web application saying I want to use cookies. All right. At the top of my routing, I look into so this variable here, session, this is a hash variable provided to me by Rhoda because I said, by rack, because I said I want to store my session information in a cookie. Every time a user comes to me, Rhoda will automatically receive the cookie, get the information out of it, and put it into the session variable for me. So I can access whatever was in the cookie as if it was just a Ruby hash. Wow, so nice. Okay. And what I'm going to look for in the session information in the cookie is for a key called current account. That's where I'm going to use that key to store the information about this user, or at least about this user's account. Okay. Before they've logged in, it doesn't exist. It'll return nil. It'll say, well, there's no such thing in the cookie. There is no cookie even. Okay. So in the beginning, current account will be nil. And if current account is nil, it tells my application this user has not logged in yet. Once they log in, I'm going to change this session variable, this current account key, to hold the account information. All right, cool. So then the routing begins. Let's go to the auth route. So this is post/auth/login. So when the user goes to, well, let's log out for a second. So the user comes to login, they enter this information. I gotta pick an easier password to type. Dang it, son of a. It's this user. This is my development credentials. It's in my seeds. You can go find it on GitHub. It's not a secret. It's my pass. I just gotta concentrate when I write it. Okay. So you saw when I hit login there. When I enter that information and I post it, it comes to my auth controller. Okay. Why does it come to my auth controller? Because if I go to the login file, you'll notice I have a form in my login file with the username and password as text boxes. And this form posts, the method is post, this form posts all the data to /auth/login. All right. By the way, many people don't realize you don't have to always post form data. You can set it as get parameters. It'll come in the URL. All right. But I don't want the username and password in the URL, so I'm using post, so it goes in the body of the HTTP request to auth/login. So here's my controller for auth/login. What do I do in the web application to authenticate the user? Well, I can't authenticate the user in the web application because I don't have the database. The database is at the API side. So what I do is I have a service object called authenticate account in my web application. What does it do? It makes a request to my API. API URL is in my secrets.yaml file. In my secrets.yaml file, I have a link to the location of my API. Oh, geez, no. Yeah, I have a link to the location of my API. Okay, so I make a and I'm going to use a gem called HTTP. Have you played with HTTP yet? The gem? No, not the gem. I don't think we've played with the gem yet. There's a gem called HTTP. You just put it into your gem file and bundle install, and this allows you to make any kind of HTTP request. So my web application makes an HTTP post request to my APIs /auth/authenticate route. I showed you that route at the beginning of the class. Okay? And it passes in the username and password as a JSON string. I love this gem HTTP. This is how easy it is to pass JSON along. You just say, here it is. If you say JSON, it'll send it in the body as a JSON object. If you say form, it'll be sent as a regular HTML form object, HTTP form object, okay? So I just send this to my API. And then my API should respond to me, and that response gets stored in the response object, and I make sure the response for my API is 200, meaning I found this user. Okay? If not, I say unauthorized. Then I parse the response. The response object comes with a really nice little method called parse. If it gets a JSON, if it receives JSON data, it'll just parse it back into a Ruby hash. Okay? And I return the attributes to my controller. So my controller now finishes this service object request, and it's now, if the user has successfully logged in, I have account information about this user. The account information I have is only the username and email, not the password, obviously. Okay, my API does not return passwords to anybody, it just returns username and email. So this account object is now a hash with the username and email, and I store this account into my session variable with the key current account. Okay. When this route ends, Rhoda will automatically take the session variable and send it to the browser as a cookie. All right. This is how I'm sending the login. This is how I'm sending the account information to the browser to keep. All right. So all you got to do is to change your cookies is just change the session variable. When this route ends and the response is sent back to the browser, your whole session object is sent as a cookie. All right. Why is a cookie? Because I told Rack I want to store all my session information in the cookie within 4 kilobytes. Now, every time I go to a page, every time I go to any other page after I've logged in, Rhoda will first extract my current account information from the cookie and put it into @current_account. Okay? So in any of my routes, I can check @current_account. If it's nil, it means the user has not logged in. If the user has logged in, this @current_account object will have some account information of the person who's logged in, like their username and email. Okay? What do I do when the user logs out? So here's me logging out. I go to this dropdown, somia.ray, and I hit log out. What happens when I log out? It looks like I'm logged out. Log out is brutally simple. All that happens when I log out is I delete that cookie. I delete this information in the cookie. The current account information in the cookie is just deleted. Okay. Then I redirect the user to the login page. And all I've really done to implement a logout, and think about this carefully, all I've done to implement a logout is I'm deleting in the cookie the fact that I'm logged in. That's it. I'm not changing anything on the server side. On the browser side, I'm simply saying I'm deleting the current account information. I want you to think about that for just a minute. All the server does to log me out is change a cookie, right? And in fact, I could cheat if I was a company. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of companies cheat on this. When you log out, you never log out. All they do is they don't delete your account information from the cookie. In the cookie, they just have a flag called login, and they just set it to true or false. So every time you visit their page, they get your account information from the cookie. They keep it in the cookie all the time. So every time you visit their page, they know who you are. There's just a flag in the cookie telling them should the page look like you're logged in or logged out. All right. So this whole idea of logging in, logging out is a complete facade. It's a total lie. You don't have to be logged out. I'm being honest by deleting the account information from the cookie. So there's no way for me to know who the user is when they come back to me. I could totally cheat and keep the account information, but keep another little key in here saying, pretend the user is logged out. Don't tell them they're logged in, actually. So there's no real such thing as logging in and logging out of a website. is just a flag that says, should I look like I'm logged in or should I look like I'm logged out? Either way, the cookies usually on a lot of companies have information about who you are. So when every time I go to Amazon, they know who I am. They just pretend they don't know who I am. All right. So it's a terrible trick. But I strongly encourage you, as students of this class, delete this information from the cookie. Really don't know who they are, because that's the kind of contract we have with users. When they log out, they like to believe that the website doesn't know who they are. Unfortunately, I'll bet you money when you log out of Facebook, Facebook totally knows who you are. They just pretend they don't know who you are. Okay?
The difference is Facebook doesn't have users; they have used.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they have users in the sense that drug dealers have users. You
They
know,
have used.
used people. Okay, all right, all right. So this is login and log out. So one of the things I hope, like as a tech savvy and security savvy person, you realize is when you go to a page like Facebook and you log out, you're not doing a damn thing. All you're doing is you're telling Facebook, pretend I'm not logged in, but you're totally logged into Facebook all the time. All right. But I hope you don't make web applications like that. I hope when you make web applications, you really delete the tracking information in the cookie. So when they come to you, you don't know who they are. You don't have an ID for them. And in a lot of companies, they'll be like, don't worry about what your professor told you. We just do it this way here. It's unethical. So just be aware of that. All right. Um, and you have a choice as a developer whether you want to work in a company that does it or doesn't do that. You're you're talented enough that you can always find a company that is ethical, all right? And that's always been one of the mottos of this class is that we spend so much time learning all this coding so that when you go out and you get a job and they're doing unethical stuff, you don't have to say, oh shit, I better just do what they tell me because I can't lose my job. I hope you're all sophisticated enough developers that you tell the company, yeah, you either stop doing this or go find another company. All right. You should have that courage. Otherwise, what good are we in this world? All right. So this is the workflow we're going to be doing. All right. And this is how we're going to establish logging in and logging out. All right. If you look at your browser, by the way, your cookies are in your browser. They're stored right in your browser. Okay. They are, however, um, they may or may not be encrypted in some form. So when you actually look into your cookie, so like let's say I go and let me go log in really quickly. Semi array. Oh yeah, you guys, son of a. Gotta. So I'm logged in here. I can just ask my browser. Let me just inspect this page and see what's going on in this page. Okay. Within this inspect window of many browsers, they come with this inspect window, so you can look at all the HTML and CSS and everything on this page. There'll be a little option here called storage. You see that? Storage. So I'm going to click on storage, and here it will tell me different types of things that I've stored, including cookies from this page. So it says from localhost 9292, here's the cookie that got stored. All right. And you may say, oh, wow, look, so what is the cookie in here? It says rack.session because rack is the one that's controlling this cookie for me. Remember when I said use rack session cookie? Rack is controlling the cookies for me. And it's got all the cookie information in here, in this thing. Here's the value of the cookie. So everything I stored, my account information, etc. I cannot make this bigger. What the hell? Okay. It's all in here. All right. What is all this crap? Essentially what rack is simply doing is not doing anything it's so super interesting. It's simply base 64. I'm not going to use this code right now because I'm short on time. This is the raw data of my cookie. It's not encrypted. It's just base 64 encoded. That's all it is. If you decode this base 64, decode this, you will get the raw data back. All right. In fact, I've given you the function right down here to decode a cookie. So if I run this decode session on the value of that cookie, you can get the value of the cookie by simply double-clicking on this value and hitting copy. You can copy this cookie. All right? Excuse me. So when I decode the cookie, you will see that it's actually a JSON hash that looks like this. It's got a session ID in here. So rack keeps a ID of the session. And this is the current account that I made. Remember, like in my cookie, I said current account equals and the account information. Here's the hash for that in JSON form. Well, this is actually returned to me as a Ruby hash by my decode session function. So the current account, it says type account, username, email. That's what I'm storing in the cookie. All right. There's something else in the cookie. At the end of the cookie, there'll be two dashes, dash dash, and then this funny little, then the funny number sequence like this. Like blah, 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 blah. This is actually a hash of all of this stuff. It's a hash of all of that. However, it's hashed by, this is hashed by rack, and it uses a key to create this hash. All right. The purpose of this hash is the following. Um, in a lot of places, I don't know if Chrome will allow me to do it. Does it allow me to do it? Yes. I can actually change my cookies in my browser. So that's a security problem because I can always go to my browser, decode that cookie, change the account information to be Edgar instead of Somia.ray, and then send the cookie back to the server. And now I'll be logged in as Edgar, right? Nice. To help prevent that, Rack will produce a hash which has been created using a secret key. And the secret key has to be provided to it when you set up this Rack session cookie feature. Okay. So the secret key should be in your secrets.yaml. For now, I've just put some stupid secret here, like some secret. In production, we'll put a much more secure key in there. All right. And this way, if somebody does manipulate the cookie, because it's so easy to do, when it comes back to the server, Rack will detect that the cookie has been tampered with and it will reject the cookie. Okay. So this is a data integrity feature built into Rack. And I thought as a class demonstration, what I've usually done in most years is that I have not put a secret in here until a later week when I talk about securing web applications. But lately, what I've noticed is that if I don't provide that secret key and I start my application, I will get a warning from Rack saying security warning. No secret option is provided to me. This poses a security threat and it allows people to tamper with your cookies. It will not be supported. So in future versions of Rack, they will not even allow you to not provide a hashing secret. And if somebody tries to do it, it'll just delete all your cookies for you immediately. All right. So therefore, my demonstration no longer works, and I have to provide this session secret. Okay. Cannot wait any longer. Cool. If for any reason you need to store more information in the cookie, you need more session. You need to store more session information than what the cookie allows. You can tell Rack, don't store that session information in the cookie, store it on a local server. And on the cookie, just put the session ID and then just you'll know who they are when they come back in with the session ID. But keep the session information on the local server. To do that, you only have to change one word in your code. Instead of saying use rack session cookie, you say use rack session pool. Pool means use the memory pool of this server to store all the session information. When you do that, your cookie will go from being this big down to just this big. Because all this is the session ID of the session variable on the server side. And every time users come in, Rack will look at this ID number, look at its own session hash, and it'll pick out the right session data for this user and give it to you in the session hash. Okay. So that's a very, very, very simple change. to going from storing session information in the cookie to storing it on your local server. It's just changed one word. That's it. Okay. Just remember, if you store session information on the server cannot crash, because if it crashes, you lose all that information. So basic information, I think it's safe to store it in a cookie, right? All right, how much more do I have? Just my last slide. The last thing I wanted to tell you was, how do I make these really amazing flash messages like "Welcome back, Somya," or what are the other flash? Let me close this inspection. Yeah, when I log out, it says it doesn't say anything. But if I just enter some crap password, it'll say username and password did not match our records. All right, try again. So how do I make those interesting little messages? Well, once again, Rhoda does this for me. It's got a really nice feature to create these messages for you automatically. All you've got to do is in your web application, use the plugin called Flash. Again, this is not Adobe Flash. This is the Flash messages, okay? And this is all you've got to do is when you want to give the user a Flash message, in the route that loads that view, simply say flash notice or flash error. There's a hash called flash that this plugin called Flash gives you. It gives you a little hash object called flash, and you just set your message in here with using the key notice or the key error. That's all you do, okay? And then you'll notice in my layout.slim file, which we looked at some time ago. Where's my slim file? In my layout file, you'll notice down here, I've got a line saying render flashbar. Flashbar is just a file that looks like this. Where's flashbar? It's a slim file that just says this. It says, if the flash hash is set to error, oh, excuse me. If the flash message is set to error, then create a div element in Bootstrap of type alert danger. This creates a red message bar in Bootstrap. If it's set to alert success, it creates a green message box. Bootstrap does that for you. So I just put the message right into that box. That's all I do. All right. This is kind of interesting because, oh, by the way, the other thing I should show you about layout.slim that I forgot to mention before, this dash dash yield, basic in the layout file, this says any page you're trying to load goes here. So the home page goes here. Any page goes here. The rest of the layout is above. All right. And you can have a footer below that if you want. You can have a page footer below the yield if you want. All right. So what did I want to say about Flash? Yeah, so basically just use the Flash object that comes with the Flash plugin to create a notice or an error, and then have a little flash bar that shows up in your layout. Just put the flash bar. The code for the flash bar file is right here. It's as simple as that. So hold on a second. How does what happens if I have an error or a message I want to send to the user, but I want to redirect them to another page and show it on the next page, not on this page? Then what happens? The Flash plugin is a little bit of magic. If you set that Flash hash object with your warning or your success message, it doesn't just get used for this current page. The Flash plugin actually puts this message into your cookies for you. So if you navigate the user or redirect them to another page, that message will get sent to the browser, and the browser will return it to the server on the redirect. Okay. So long story short, when I set this flash message, like welcome back, Somia Ray, it gets put into my cookies for me. So then when I redirect them from the login page to the home page, the cookie tells me what was the flash message that I wanted to send to the user. All right. Okay, that's probably a little confusing, but as you play with it, you'll kind of get to understand what I'm talking about here. All right. Okay, that's all I wanted to mention, and I think we're done. So for this week, all I'm going to ask you to do is all you're required to do. You can do more, but all you're required to do is just create this login feature. We'll talk about registering users next week, or I think next week or so. But for now, just have a login feature so that users, if you've seeded your database with some example accounts, users can kind of log in to your web application. Your web application will talk to your API and do the authentication with the API. All right. Okay. Any questions on this? Everyone's guarding their hands. Oh, yes, questions. Yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry. I should have really mentioned that in much better detail earlier. So let me say this again. Let me go back to where I explained how you can, sorry to make you dizzy scrolling up and down. Uh, 22? 22? Holy crap, it is that far down? Okay. 22. Yeah. This yield? Okay. Actually, let me explain the yield a little bit higher up. That yield doesn't belong to Flash. Let me explain what that yield is for. Okay. Um, all right. Remember, I said that you can create your pages like this, right? Like my home page. And what Rhoda will do is it'll put the page within this layout. So this layout describes the layout of all my pages, right? So how does it know where my home page goes in this layout? So every time I load a page, like the home page, what Rhoda will do is it'll first load the layout page. It'll render the layout page as HTML. And then the page you really wanted to see, like the home page, it will inject it right here where I said yield. Dash dash yield means show the page that was really meant to be shown here. Okay? So every page will get injected right into here, into the layout. Notice dash dash yield does not have to be the final line of your layout. You can have more stuff below it. Like you can have a little footer for your page or whatever you want. Okay? Does that explain what dash dash yield is now? It tells the layout page that any page you're trying to render goes here within this layout. The layout has my headers, my navigation bar, etc., etc. This dash dash, not dash, equal render command just tells Rhoda there's another there's another HTML page that I need you to put in here. So flash bar was a slim page, basically a HTML page. My nav bar is also an HTML page. Excuse me, this navigation bar you see on top, once I log in, the navigation bar changes, right? When I go from somia.ray, uh, the navigation bar changes to something else, right? Let me show you the code for my navigation bar really quickly. So it was nav. I rendered a page called nav. So here's nav, all right? Uh, um, here's the HTML code for my navigation bar. This is a lot of this code is, this is all the code, oh, just this line of code, is telling Bootstrap that I have, this creates a navigation element, and Bootstrap will know that it has to modify the colors and everything because I'm using the Bootstrap classes navbar, expand, etc., etc. Navbar tells Bootstrap, please render this nicely using your theme. Navbar expand tells Bootstrap, make this a navigation bar that can expand and turn into a collapsible menu if the user is looking at it on a small device. Here's some more theme information, etc., etc. Okay. And then here's the rest of my navigation bar. I've got two links. One is they're both of class navbar brand that tells Bootstrap this is the brand of my company or my website. One of them is an image with the logo of my website. The other is just a link to the homepage saying create. These are elements within the navigation bar. Okay, you'll notice my navigation bar has a little bit of Ruby script in here saying, is this user logged in? If they're logged in, then if they are logged in, then show them like a projects link and show them a link with their account name, which drops down and has a logout feature as well. If they're not logged in, then the navigation bar should have login and register. All right? Cool. Does that answer the question about yielding and the navigation bars and stuff like that? All right. So have fun playing with this, and you don't have to use exactly the web page to make it look exactly like mine. But the goal of today, of this week, is make this new web application and make this login feature so that your web application talks to your API to send the credentials over securely. All right? Okay? All right. Okay, I'll let it go at that. Have yourselves a great, what day is it today?
Friday.
Weekend. Okay.